perception, and especially others' perception of you. It is a world of connection and interaction. And that is its most powerful basis, is asking another person's view on yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Okay.
That doesn't mean you take that as gospel,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
But it is very important for the self-reflection process to use others' input. And that's a really weird statement because you would think self-reflection is a solo act. It's not entirely known. Honestly, the most powerful self-reflection is done with periodic group and solo time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Good. Okay, Miss Vicky, you got more for us?
I do. I'm going to shift to the darkness because that was another very startling time for me. They're good and bad. They're negative and positive. They're really not there.
Which I want to add. Can I interrupt you for a second? I want to add that is really Newtonian thinking on the way that our society came up with trying to classify things and label things, and kind of like a 2 or 3 dimensional way of things. And so we for many years really only thought as good or bad, helpful, harmful. Like we couldn't see that there's a lot of gray area. And so now with quantum physics, it's kind of expanded that understanding that there are many layers as far out and as far inward, and that it's not as simple as something is good and something is bad. So go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate that. Accepting the darker self. It was commented, and once again, I can read this portion if I need to. Accepting the darker self, you let them return to the energy that they are. So you've got that dark thought, and you're like, oh, don't tell me I'm doing this again. And then you process that, you let it go back to the energy it is, which is meaning it doesn't really have anything to do with my present life. It's part of my past. It's part of my learning that I'm probably still learning somewhat. What is that when you send the energy, whenever it is letting that dark return to the energy that it is?
This is a great question because so many people struggle with this idea. And I know for myself, I'm a gardener. Mm-hmm. So water is water. I can use it whether it's cold or hot. Mm-hmm. If it's very hot, yes, it will burn us. And if it's very, very cold, it freezes and it burns us, kind of on either extreme. But it's water. It can be used. Ice can melt. Steam returns to water. It's still water. And all of that can be used. So energy is kind of similar in that it is energy, period. And so if there's something painful and hurtful and dark within us, as we kind of accept that and understand that, it's still just energy that is returned and used and moved through, rather than us holding on to it in that stuck position. Mm-hmm. Like when you kink a water hose and you holding back all the water. Mm-hmm. So it's, the process of seeing it as energy that moves and that it can be used. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we'll see what Bob says.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. It very much is that. It's recognizing that energy exists as it does, and you are the one who has decided and told it to be pain. You are the one who has decided and told it to be joy. And you can decide and tell it, I don't need you to be that anymore. And it will return to being that which it was, waiting for you to give an order, waiting for you to make a decision on what it should be. And people struggle with this concept because of things like, I don't choose how I feel. On some level, you do. And that's the issue, is because that level is unseen. That level, there is an awareness to that level. The feelings and the emotions are chosen on a level above conscious awareness. So it's bringing that level, that awareness, to a level of consciousness that allows you to then make the decision yourself. That is the difference.
You are choosing whether you're doing it unconsciously or consciously. And it's like waking up to that choice in an interaction and then choosing it consciously of how I want to proceed.
Okay.
So this is really a sticking point for a lot of people, because they go through a lot of pain and a lot of abuse and a lot of heartache, and they say, I didn't choose that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can choose the response. You can choose the response. If you were abused growing up, and I speak from experience, if you're an abused person growing up, as an adult, you now can choose the response to that situation. So you can carry it, like dragging baggage along behind you forever, and it's heavy,
Mm-hmm.
or you can choose to lay it down and say, what did I learn? How can I process through this? And how can I move forward in a way that is more helpful to me? Okay.
That gives me a lot to reflect on. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely be doing that. Are you ready for my next question?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of long, and it talks about my Christian life once again, because a lot of what comes from in was deeply affected by that, because, that was very real for me. And I see it now as very real. But I compare my Christian life to what I'm doing now and what I'm experiencing now. And, whenever I started the School of Metaphysics, and Alex was my teacher, I don't know if he recognized this, but, I was very bitter toward the church. And I had been in that point for probably about 8 to 10 years. And I just didn't feel like the two could ever go together. So it was like I was studying something totally different. And I see so many similarities, but I have gotten to the point where I rejoice in my past Christianity, because I'm seeing more and more ties to the metaphysical life. But one thing that Christians tend to really do a lot of is they love to study Revelations. They love to study the end of the world. I myself, in the 70s, I was a great fan of Hal Lindsey's book, Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth, and The Great Lake Planet Earth. And they were all about how the world was going to end and all that. Well, I realized after about a year of really studying those that they were scare tactics, and built, a lot of the fascination was on the fear of what's going to happen. And I thought, no, I'm withdrawing from that. You know what? It's my business to live my Christian life the best I know, to be what God wants me to be. And then I'll be prepared for the end. Okay. And so I'm not going to think about that end anymore. Now I hear what we discussed last week, that we're now in the stage where things are going to really change very, very, very drastically in the coming years. And I find myself wanting to go hide from that. Not because I'm scared of it, but because I think I'm going to be prepared for that if I really, dig in and do all my stuff. I'm going to be all prepared to move into that. But is that wise in this situation?
What's funny is, there's a whole other thought out there. There's many thoughts about Revelation, but there's a whole other thought out there that actually the symbolic meaning of Revelation is the change in the chakra system and how the body opens up and changes and evolves in this ascension process.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that view of Revelation, then there's definitely more hope and more positive imagery of how the body is now changing to be one with the soul, which is what Gabriel talked about last time.
Mhm.
So I guess in some ways it's whether you want to take more literal or, the figurative or imaginary. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. Like an image in a different form of what Revelation says. So let's see what Paul says.
So your question in essence is it okay to run and hide from the apocalypse?
Prepared for it. I just don't want to spend all my time thinking about it. So many people just talk about the end times and they say it, and every week or two you hear it. So
Yeah.
My family included, which darling people. So
yeah.
The earth has faced 7 different shifts like this. 7 different times has a shift occurred, and a good amount of the population of that has left through various different means. Some ascended completely, body and soul, and left. Some were wiped off the planet. Those shifts happen regardless of what people do. They are saying it that way, it makes you seem less important to the shift overall, when in fact this shift is about you, which is a difficult thing to describe. Let me start here. This shift is self-imposed. Humanity as a whole, on the other side, has decided that at this point in time, it is ready to move forward. Now, whether they are actually ready or not depends on your reactions to the situations. So wanting to be ready to face it, no amount of preparation you do, no amount of push forward will you ever know if you are ready.
okay.
No amount of I'm going to back off and I'm going to learn and I'm going to make sure I'm resilient within myself and that we have supplies. There will be nothing that can be done there, because this shift is not going to be some instant decision that happens in a day or two and then you have to deal with it. It's going to happen over a period, and it will be fairly obvious when that period arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really do as much work as you can, but you are going to end up either capable or not in that situation regardless.
Okay. Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
It does. I need to include it.
Kind of like preparing for an ACT test. You're right.
Yeah.
You could, but it's
Yeah, but what do you
Okay, did you have another question?
I do actually have 2. Hopefully they won't be too long, but okay. About, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, I discovered that I was an empath. I have so covered it up because I didn't want to be emotional. I didn't want people to see me cry, all that. So I really, really hardened off. And now that I have accepted it, I'm seeing the world so differently, and I'm getting information about it and starting to understand more. So I'm thinking, as an empath, when I ask this question, can you give us a look at the upcoming changes through the eyes of an empath? Is there anything we need to watch in particular?
With the ascension process?
Yeah.
Yeah, because as empaths, you guys get this information early because you get it from the whole collective consciousness as it is starting to get ready. You guys are going to be the ones really sensing that and knowing something's coming when other people may not be quite aware just yet.
So our intuition is going to help. It's kind of like the last question too. It's going to help me be aware that the situation is coming. So therefore I really do need to be informed. Okay.
But it's also a very dangerous thing to be an empath in this time.
Really?
So let me explain why. I want to be very detailed in why it is dangerous. There is a collective connection, unity in humanity. Those of us here acknowledge that. But one of the things we think about the abilities of an empath is we think it is distance related. It is this like distance, like I'm next to you and I'm feeling your emotions and I'm connecting with your emotions, and then I step away from that connection. That's not how it works. You become aware of the connection. That connection is always there. And the thing to be even more aware of is that as an empath, your connection to the whole of humanity is always there. So when the world suffers, so do you. When the world is happy, so are you. You are connected to the whole emotional mass of humanity. Your mind protects you from that emotional mass. It keeps your awareness small so that you do not be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of power that is present. This ascension will challenge that. This ascension will open you up to it. So you see why I say dangerous. The thing to note about that process is resilience and self-reliance. That is the most important thing for an empath in these times, is the idea of, even in that storm that you will be thrown into in terms of awareness, if you know yourself and you can keep hold of yourself, there is so much information and power to be gained. And it's working on the ability to keep yourself, even in the most hectic of situations, that you learn that ability. But I will say, it's not going to be easy regardless of how much preparation you do.
Okay. It's going to have to develop some endurance, I guess.
And not all empaths are going to be open to the same degree as each other. But there is a definite possibility you open yourself, even accidentally, to the whole of that mass.
All right.
Remember that you are supported on the other side. So anytime you're feeling overwhelmed by that connection, you need to ask for help. You are not alone.
It's why the one sitting here struggles so much, is because his empathic abilities are so expanded at every moment to that level. So you might understand why there's so much emotional power there. Is because instead of using his own feelings, he is using the power of the whole to even empower tiny moments. And that makes him strong, but it also makes him fragile.
Okay. All right. That's what I learned there. Okay, I have one last question. Then I hope Mary has lots, but You made one, well, Gabriel made a statement, and I've already ran this by Wendy, so you know where this is, I assume, but we're talking about ascension, and Wendy had voiced to Gabriel, she was trying to replay what he just said, and she mentioned, most people, when they think about the ascension, they think of Jesus, and Gabriel stepped in and said, well, that's actually not his first ascension or something like that. Can you tell me what that meant?
He said he was already ascended when he came down. So people think of Jesus as when he died, he ascended because he came back in the light being form. Mm-hmm. But Jesus came here in that ascension state. He came here already knowing, with the knowing. That's actually his symbol. If you're in dream language interpreter, Jesus is the knower. So he came here with that knowledge of ascension. He didn't have to get to ascension.
Okay.
So
I've been asked a question from within to answer something, and I think it's a good thing to answer. Who is Jesus?
Yeah.
Jesus is a master. On the other side, he is a master. He has spent lifetimes before this last one he had learning much, taking time to learn what it means to be alive in the first place. And not just human lifetimes, everything else. Mm-hmm. And he is not the first to have done this. He is not the first to have stepped into so many rings to learn what it means to exist in this universe and what it means to create in this universe. And when he stepped into that life, he had a very specific goal in mind: to teach people to trust their own ability to create change in the world, which is what he did. Mm-hmm. And then what happened out of it is people attached to this sort of external power that gave them the ability to. That's not entirely what he intended. He intended for it to be an internal journey, which is what happens some of the time with Christians and that realm of religion, is people attach to this internal journey and create their own bond with God, and they then are able to use their own internal power and this connection to God to do what they need to. That's more what he intended. Mm-hmm. But it was more the intention of, you have divine in you. You have God gave you the ability to choose, to create on your own strength and the strength of the whole. And that's what he wanted to teach, which he did for the most part.
Yeah, I always saw him as the example. And the example was, it was an internal journey. And in that internal journey, he was showing us the connection to the creator, the connection to all, and through that power, then all things can be accomplished, which he says we can do all these things and more. We just have to understand that process.
And if you look at his story that is told, he even goes to various different Buddhist temples and goes to various different places. He learns from so many different avenues, even within that lifetime, even though he knows all of it. Mm-hmm. Why is he learning? Mm-hmm. He's learning to show people that that's the path. Mm-hmm. He's learning to show people that the way to achieve internal power is through the interaction and the isolation. Mm-hmm. Is through the interaction and the checking and the choices and the experiences, and then an isolation to reflect on those and decide what is useful, decide what is helpful to you, and then to step back into the arena over and over and over again. Because no amount of knowledge has any power without it being used somewhere. If knowledge is not used, it is pointless. And that's most of what he wanted to teach you, is learn and use what you've learned to make an effect on the world in any small capacity you can.
That's why you would always find him down with the homeless and the downtrodden and the
Because they are the ones who need it.
You know, as I look back on my Christian life, I see that I was preparing for what I'm doing now, as we all know. But although I attended church regularly for most of 50 years, always there teaching, active, all that, I wasn't churchy. It was about the spiritual relationship, that interior, that power, that how we change ourselves. I believe firmly, many of the changes that I made in my life early, such as controlling anger and things like that, those were spiritual changes that we meditated on. I prayed on, I worked on, I memorized scripture for, but it worked. And it's because, I didn't get involved in church politics or how churches work or anything like this. To me, that was the treasure of that church, was that personal inside relationship and how you can influence others with that.
The interesting part about any course in metaphysics is it usually teaches universal laws, and universal laws were, of course, here before any foundation of religion. So that's why you find them in all the religions, like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. These core concepts, these universal laws, are what ties those religious teachings together. That's the commonality. And what we have found is when we work with people, their own path of whatever religious teachings they choose get stronger because they understand the basic core of it. Yeah. So how about you, Miss Mary? Do you have any more questions?
Just one, and it very much is what y'all were just talking about. I've been a lifelong learner, and the more you know, the more you realize what you don't know. And I've thought, here, Jesus, who knew everything, went and studied for 13 or 15 years, wherever you happen to read, it's a little different. And right now, I'm pretty much reading everything I can get my hands on. I listen to podcasts and I'm looking at that, and the best I can do to determine if it's legitimate information or just someone wanting attention or whatever their purpose might be, is all I can do is trust my gut and trust my heart on it, to know if that's information I should hang on to or just let go. Is there a better way to do that?
Good question. So on your journey of exploring and learning, you're really trying to understand how to use discernment to whether that is something truth-based that you can really hold on to, or is it something else? And I think that's a really good question, because we have a lot of that out there right now, that it's like, what do you believe in? Because some of it is kind of, really out there. and you're not sure of sources, and so it's a great question. So how can she improve this discernment of what is she learning and what should she keep, or what is truth?
To be honest, she's doing pretty much all she needs to. The intuition or internal sense is going to be the biggest guide to it. So that is pretty much the answer.
How does someone strengthen their intuition?
Strengthen isn't the right term.
Okay.
It's not a skill, particularly. It's not something you learn and you get better at. That's not entirely how it works. That might be how it appears on the surface, but that's not how it works. What it is a growing knowledge of your connection to things, and that knowledge is directly equal to how strong it is. So, how to describe that? This is a little bit difficult one to answer. So you live in a world based on computers and networks. And the computer's ability to connect to a network and process information is different based on the computer, correct? That's pretty much the idea, is that you strengthen yourself, not your intuition. And as you strengthen yourself through knowledge and discipline and growth and even things upwards of like exercise and those things, strengthening the body also. So then therefore does the knowledge of self and the knowledge of that connection grow. So then therefore the intuition and its strength grows approximate with it. That is, until a certain point. There is a point in intuition that you reach where the sort of physical and mental limits start to set in. Not the physical and mental limits that are self-imposed, but the physical and mental limits of the body itself. Because for as strong as they are, these bodies are not capable of certain things. And when those start to set in, then so does this need for the next process, which is this ascending of the consciousness to something greater. And when that consciousness has ascended into that greater state, then you gain access to the fullness of what intuition really is. It is connection absolute. It is the ability to draw knowledge from every corner of the universe. It is omniscience. The small idea of intuition that each person uses is this very limited form of omniscience. And it's when those limits are taken off that you become aware of the knowledge of the whole. So you see a theme here, constantly circulating throughout all of these topics, is the idea of getting to a place where you access the infinite. And how that process comes through experience and growth and training, yes. But at the end of the day, it's really about making a decision to connect. And if you can make that decision, even early on in that process, and really solidify that decision, then for moments you will gain access to that infinite. For moments you will gain access to that all-powerful sense that comes from the whole of the universe, and the whole of all the knowledge and power collected. You have that capability. It is a difficult thing to access on a physical plane, hence the ascension process.
That sounds like that wrapped all that up.
So,
I don't know fully if that answered your direct question, though, Mary.
I think so.
For me, I think on a come down here level, it's just been knowing that every time that I'm doing something like Mary's talking about, like you're in meditation or you're sensing something, is to trust. And I think that's hard in the beginning. But every time I trust the intuition and I have the experience of connection and receiving, then the next time I'm more open to trust and more open to it. And it seems to expand as long as I'm willing to choose to trust the process.
And it's not to describe that as progressive is interesting, because it's not exactly progressive. It's more like you are opening a door and you open it halfway and then you'll close it back. And then you'll open it halfway and then you'll close it back. And then you learn how to open it more. And then you'll close it back over and over again.
Yep.
And it's not that you're getting stronger in your ability to, it's not that the connection is widening. It's that you're getting stronger in your ability to make the decision to open that door.
I agree. And he's talking a lot about, for those that are just learning this, the door between conscious mind and subconscious mind, or higher mind, as some people call it, the connection to all. Wow. Do we have any other questions?
I'm sure I'll think of some later.
Well, thank you for coming and joining us today. And I hope this really helps some people. And if you have questions, please send them to us and we will include them on the next videos. And peace to you all.